This is the Griffin Realty Group Ask-A-Griffin podcast, episode number 72. We continue in our agent plan, and the question on the table is, do you demonstrate a clear plan based on tangible benefits? Are you a home seller or buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential property? Or maybe you're an agent who needs direction, but you can't find an easy way to get your answers? Well, then, hey, you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Griffin Realty Group and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. And to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you need to sell or buy property right now or in the near future, or maybe you want to become a real estate agent, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. All right, let's get started here. In this episode, like I said, the question is, do you demonstrate a clear plan based on tangible benefits? In other words, in your presentation of your brand and the way that you do business, is there a plan? So really the question begs a rhetorical probably not. Meaning that most agents sell property on muscle. And what that means is there really is no plan. There's just a way of doing it. Top producers sometimes have fallen into using some implements and maybe a marketing piece or whatever it might be, but they really have never really developed a plan that clearly articulates benefits to the seller or buyer consumer. So how do you go about doing this? Well, the first step is pretty easy. You chunk up your plan into steps. So in other words, as a longtime top producer who sold a lot of properties, I would, like I said, develop a rhythm more so than a plan. So there were certain things that I would go out and do, and perhaps I had some folders and I would put certain implements in there to make my case, and most of it was marketing about me, meaning here's my resume, here's what company I'm at, here's how we do things generally. But then I started to understand that really, when you're educating a seller or buyer consumer, you need to show them what's in it for them if they're to go through the process with you. So really what that begs is, what's your plan? I mean, think about it. If you sat down with financial planners and you compared them, you're going to compare their plans and certainly how those plans relate to you achieving that goal. So the way that I got started was I chunked up what I was doing into steps. So in other words, if I were going to list a property, I was always spending a lot of time talking about how to price it right. What was the right asking price? Any adjustments that might need to be made? How would I do that? So my first chunk was pricing. Then I started to think, well, what really affects pricing is the condition. So what advice do I typically give my sellers on conditioning, whether it's reconditioning heavy, big items? Should I rehab this house? Should I put the roof on? Should I put a new heating system in? A lot of big ticket items that are expensive and little things that they were missing. And then really, although it feels like the same thing, once you've reconditioned a house, there is some staging that needs to be done. So a lot of people say, well, I hear I'm supposed to take all my personal stuff out. Yes, to a large extent, but not to strip the property down. So I realized staging was a real separate conversation. So here was price affected. If you wanted to move up the price range, you needed to recondition, you needed to do some staging. And then and only then could I get into marketing the property because all that had been done properly. And once the marketing begins, whether you went up into the multiple listing service or you were being pushed around through an open house, I'm doing one tomorrow, for example. That's what I call push marketing. And that would lead to communication from the buyers and the buyers' agents, and we would know where we stand versus the competition because they're typically out seeing multiple properties. And then lastly, that would lead to negotiation, and we could use the same pricing information we used to price it to make the case during negotiation. And lastly, we close it with care, crossing all T's, dotting all I's. Boom. 7 steps. Now, I won't go into the buyer plan, but I made 6 steps there, and I chunked these things up. And so they were in really 2 just outlines. So that was the first step. And it became extremely clear to any seller or any buyer what the process was with me and what they could expect and what their benefits were. Now, the second thing that I learned, the second point here in this podcast is when you have a clear plan like that, what happens is you begin to eliminate the consumer's misperceptions by educating them. See, we always assume that the consumer is so already knowledgeable about this process, especially if we have clientele that are smart. For example, in one of our markets in Boston, there are plenty of highly educated people, PhDs, MDs, MBAs, on and on and on go the acronyms, right? And the idea is that we always have this perception they're so smart, but they don't do what we do. They're busy learning what they learn. We have our own language in this business that they don't understand. There are things that happen that they would have no idea. How could they? They don't do what we do, especially the micro or the little things. So they often have misperceptions about how things work. So that by chunking up your clear plans and explaining the immutable or unbreakable laws that they'll have to go through, they begin to get educated about the truth and the order of things. Now, see, there's no reason to think that has to be complicated and sophisticated. It just has to be truthful and accurate and organized and simplified. Busy people, don't you think of all people, they want it understood in a simple way? Absolutely. And that begins to show that you're also a professional, somebody that knows how to chunk your stuff up and educate through that chunked up plan and really eliminate any misperceptions so that the consumer becomes empowered to make an informed decision. Now, what all of that does, let's go back to, I mentioned it briefly. The third point and last point here is it gives them a clear path to clear outcomes and success. So what we do when we are qualifying a seller is we always ask them, why are you selling? And we listen. We listen to, and sometimes people think they know why they're selling. It sounds obvious to you, but maybe they don't. Maybe they've never really been asked that question. Why am I selling? In a market that we're in currently while I'm recording this, the market's very hot. And there are certain circumstances that are inducing that market to be hot, and they may not be there, but people get caught up in that. Say, well, gee, what if I could get this? Well, that's not really a real reason why you want to sell unless you're an investor. And that's why you're there. Because if it's your home, okay, great. What if I can get you this? Where are you going? Do you have a plan for that? You see what I mean? So oftentimes you have to get out of them why they're selling. And then further their own education by asking them, how motivated are you to sell it? That's an interesting why. Now, how motivated? And on a scale of 1 to 10, if we don't hear 9 to 10, we ask, why so low? Huh? I said 8. Yeah. In our experience, you really should be a 10, maybe a 9. So 8 is low. Why? Well, I don't know where I'm going. Well, we can help with that. So now we're beginning to define the outcomes that these chunked up plans will lead to. So in some cases, somebody who appears to be a seller first, all of a sudden you realize that their problem, why they haven't sold, is nobody's ever educated them on a simple step plan to achieve the outcome of buying. They don't know how to sell and buy at the same time. They've never been through it before. They're worried about getting stuck with 2 homes, getting stuck with neither, right? Homelessness. So there is a lot going on here in this simple concept in why we have these plans. So let's go back and reiterate. For all you agents out there, or thinking about becoming an agent, whatever your situation is, the question on the table today is, do you demonstrate a clear plan? Did you demonstrate it to the consumer, this clear plan, based on tangible benefits to them? So the way that you do that is first chunk up your plan into steps. It's like an outline. Think about a syllabus or an outline for a course or a book, whatever it might be. It's very clear. You can go to a bookstore tomorrow morning and you can look at an outline and you understand generally what's going to happen. You don't know specifically. That's the wonderful part of reading the book. So when it comes to guidance, if I show you the major steps we're going to hit, now you at least know that I have a clear plan to get A through Z. And as I begin to educate you in that, you become empowered by me in my plan that's chunked up into clear steps, and I eliminate the misperceptions that you have, and oftentimes those misperceptions are creating fear. So now you feel educated. And the third point is I'm giving you a clear path to achieve those clear outcomes that you want, which is ultimately success, all right? Let me summarize it this way. It's very important when presenting to sellers and buyers a very clear plan in simple steps, right? You have to present to them in very clear, simple steps. When you do that, the effect is that you'll begin to eliminate misperceptions about the process in its entirety and give the consumer a clear path to success. Okay. Now remember, if you're thinking about buying or selling, here we go again. You can take immediate action, right? You can take immediate action if you're thinking about buying or selling now or in the near future by getting our free step-by-step guides, the very thing I'm talking about. You can get copies of them at griffincourses.com. There are 3 of them: seller plan, buyer plan, and an agent plan. That's the core gift here of the podcast, is that thanks for listening. We always like you to know those plans are there, and you can get them anytime because you have that context, or get them for a friend or a family member. And of course, don't forget, you could subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen, or you can find us on social media. We try to be as everywhere as possible these days, right? But we'd also appreciate it, of course, if you would comment and share our content with anyone thinking about selling, buying, or maybe becoming an agent. We'd really appreciate it if you shared. But remember this, we say the same thing every time we sign off on a podcast. Nobody's coming for you. Nobody. So go get to work on the proper plan for buying, selling, or becoming an agent, and we'll see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks again.